She took my $45,000 college fund. Now I own a $960 Kelvin's house and faced her in the very room she said I'd never deserve. You ever have that moment where everything you've worked for, every sacrifice, sleepless night, and ounce of self-control culminates in a single instant? Yeah, that was me, standing in the foyer of my brand new $960,000 home, holding a glass of champagne, watching the people who betrayed me walk right through the front door like they belonged there. It was a housewarming party. My house. My dream finally realized. And in walked my mom and my sister, with that same expression I remembered seeing when I was 18, right before my entire life was torn to shreds. That cold, calculated look, like I was just a number in their budget, like my dreams were negotiable. Let's rewind, because to understand how I got here to this party, this house, this confrontation, you need to understand everything that led up to it. I grew up in Boston. On paper, we were your standard middle-class family. Dad worked in finance, Mom ran a boutique, we had a dog, and a house with a front porch. 2 daughters, me and my older sister. Let's call her Amanda. She's 3 years older than me. Blonde, charming, always the center of attention. I was more the background character in my own life for a while. The cracks started showing when I was around 12. That's when my parents split. It wasn't a dramatic divorce. No public screaming matches or custody battles. But the aftermath? It was brutal. Dad moved to Chicago, started a new family, and slowly faded into the background of my life. Mom, well, she started playing favorites. And let's just say, I wasn't the favorite. Amanda married into money. Her husband Jason was a smooth-talking investment banker from one of those families that has country club memberships going back 3 generations. Their wedding cost over $50,000, and we didn't have $50,000. My mom borrowed, scrambled, did everything she could to throw this big, flashy event, all while I was working 2 part-time jobs just to afford a bridesmaid dress. While Amanda was getting bridal showers and baby showers, I was getting student loan notices. And even then, I never really complained. I just kept my head down, worked hard, and focused on school. Fast forward a bit, Amanda had 3 kids in quick succession, and every time she needed something, my mom jumped to help. Babysitting, money, groceries, paying bills, whatever Amanda needed, it magically appeared. And if that meant I had to go without, well, too bad. I was young, independent, and didn't need as much. I had cons expect not accept and have press. With that, you've got scholarships, Mom would say. Your sister has mouths to feed. Scholarships helped, but they didn't cover everything. I was grinding 7 days a week barista in the mornings, tutoring in the afternoons, data entry on the weekends. There were days I'd fall asleep in the library because I hadn't slept the night before. But still, I kept pushing. I made Dean's List. I graduated at the top of my high school class, and through it all, I believed naively that hard work would earn me some kind of respect. Spoiler, it didn't. I still remember my 18th birthday like it happened yesterday. It was a Tuesday, and I managed to get the evening off work. I wasn't expecting a party. Amanda was pregnant again, and the whole family was wrapped around her latest life event. But still, I thought maybe, just maybe, Mom would have something planned. When I walked into the kitchen, they were sitting at the table. My mom and Amanda, surrounded by papers, half-empty coffee cups, and spreadsheets. Leftover lasagna in the fridge, Mom said, not even looking up. So, I reheated some, sat down, and noticed something that made my stomach twist. They were going through my college paperwork. "What are you guys working on?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Mom looked up, completely unfazed. "Just sorting out finances. Amanda and Jason need a bigger house with baby number 3 on the way." I nodded. This wasn't new. Amanda always needed something. But then Mom dropped the bomb. "We need to talk about your college fund." She said it like she was asking me to pass the salt. No big deal. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "Well," Amanda chimed in, "we've crunched the numbers. Even with Jason's salary and Mom pitching in, we're short for the down payment. But with your scholarships, you don't really need the fund right now." I just stared at them. "You're taking my college fund? It's for family," Mom said, like that made it noble. "That money was set aside by Dad before the divorce," I reminded her. "It's for my education." Amanda rolled her eyes. "Don't be selfish. Are you really going to let your niece and nephews grow up in a cramped apartment so you can go to some overpriced university?" That was the line. That's when something inside me snapped. I said no. It was the first time I ever stood up to them. And what happened next? I was given an ultimatum. Agree to give up the money or leave. I chose to leave. That night, I packed my bags, grabbed my laptop and what little cash I had, and walked out. No one stopped me. No one called after me. I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot, using my hoodie as a pillow. 2 weeks went by like that. I was still going to work, still studying, still pretending everything was fine. Until one day, my computer science professor found me asleep in the library. Her name was Dr. Hughes. She didn't judge, didn't pry. She just said, "You're staying with me for a while." That woman, she changed my life. She helped me find emergency grants, co-signed for student housing, and gave me references that landed me internships. She was the first adult in my life who believed in me without conditions, and she never asked for anything in return. I couldn't afford my dream school, but I made it work at a good state university. I worked insane hours waitressing, freelancing, working at the school's IT help desk, and studied every free second I had. Sleep was still a luxury, but at least I had a bed and a lock on the door. In my junior year, I met Isabella. We were polar opposites, but something clicked. I was back-end logic. She was front-end design. I was spreadsheets and syntax. She was color theory and click-through paths. Together, we built something pretty cool. We called it Sen. It started as a budgeting app for broke students like us. Nothing fancy, just a way to track spending, set savings goals, and avoid overdrafting your bank account because you forgot about that one pizza you ordered at 1 a.m. We launched it as a class project, but people loved it. After graduation, we had 2 options: take boring but stable tech jobs, or go all in and try to make Sen a real thing. We went all in. We shared a tiny apartment with a mouse problem and no air conditioning, lived on ramen, worked 18-hour days, coded until our eyes hurt, got rejected by every investor we pitched to. Some said we were too young. Others said students don't care about budgeting. But eventually, we got a grant just enough to hire a part-time marketer and revamp the app. Then we pivoted, targeted recent grads with student loans instead of current students. And that's when things exploded. A financial influencer featured us. A tech blog wrote about us. We went from 1,000 users to 10,000, then 100,000. It took 5 years of blood, sweat, and caffeine, but we got there. Eventually, a major fintech company made an acquisition offer we couldn't refuse. And just like that, I was 30 years old, financially independent, and the proud owner of a nearly $1 million house. But even with all that success, there was one chapter of my life I hadn't closed yet. So there I was, standing in the living room of my newly renovated home, sipping champagne while soft music played in the background, chatting with colleagues, investors, old college friends, and people who'd supported me through the chaos. And I was nervous. Not because of the party, not because of the guests, but because my mother and Amanda, yes, those 2 were about to arrive. I had invited them, voluntarily. Crazy, right? But after years of silence, distance, and doing the hard emotional work, I felt like I needed closure, a final confrontation, a way to either start a new chapter or slam the book shut for good. And I figured if they were going to come back into my life, they'd have to walk through the front door of the house I bought on my own, the one they said I didn't deserve. The irony was too rich to pass up. Isabella, my best friend, co-founder, and the human embodiment of tough love, was helping me set up snacks when she looked over and asked, "You sure you're ready for this?" I nodded, my stomach doing somersaults. "Yeah, I think I need to see it through." She gave me that skeptical look she does when she knows I'm walking into emotional landmines, but supports me anyway. "You got this," she said. By 3 p.m., the house was filled with the gentle buzz of a good party. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. The vibe was warm. People were complimenting the space, checking out the renovation work, and just enjoying themselves. Then the doorbell rang, and I just knew. I walked slowly to the front door, every muscle in my body tense. I opened it, and, yep, there they were. My mom, dressed like she was meeting royalty, clutching her purse like a shield. Amanda, still beautiful but noticeably stressed, with faint creases around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Behind them stood Jason, her husband, and their 3 kids, who looked a little unsure, like they'd been coached on how to act. "Thanks for having us," Mom said, all polite smiles, like nothing had ever happened. "Come in," I replied, stepping aside. "There's a game room upstairs if the kids get bored." The kids perked up at that, and after a few awkward hellos, they disappeared to play Xbox. Jason gave me a polite nod and said, "Beautiful home. The craftsmanship is impressive." "Thank you," I said. Took a while to get it how I wanted it. Amanda, never one to waste time, immediately started analyzing the space, running her fingers along countertops, opening closets, commenting on natural light like she was filming an HGTV episode. Mom followed silently, occasionally making remarks like, "This backsplash is lovely," or "You've always had a good eye for detail." It was surreal. When we got to the primary bedroom, the one with the balcony that overlooks the backyard, Amanda sat down on the edge of my bed, like it was already hers. "So, what exactly do you do now?" she asked. "Dad mentioned something about an app?" I gave them the short version, the startup, the growth, the acquisition. As I spoke, I watched their faces morph from casual curiosity to stunned disbelief. "You sold your company for millions?" Amanda asked, blinking rapidly. "We did," I said calmly. The timing was right. Amanda went quiet. Mom looked like someone had slapped her with a briefcase full of reality. We headed back downstairs. More guests had arrived, including Professor Hughes and her husband, who hugged me like proud parents. Isabella brought out more drinks, and everything felt almost normal again. Almost. Until Amanda decided to speak. She clinked her glass. "As Lena's sister, I'd just like to say something. Here we go. Family is everything," she began, resting her hand on my arm like we were close. "And seeing Lena's beautiful home today made me realize how perfect it would be for our family." A record scratch wouldn't have been more dramatic. Murmurs spread. People exchanged side eyes. Jason looked like he'd rather vanish. "What Amanda means," Mom jumped in awkwardly, "is that we're all very proud of Lena and excited to have a place where family can gather." "No," Amanda said, doubling down. "What I mean is that this house would be perfect for my family. With Jason's job stuff and the kids needing good schools, we've been looking in this area. This house is exactly what we've been searching for." Dead silence. Jason cleared his throat. "Amanda, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," she interrupted. "Lena has always wanted to help family. She's single, no kids, and clearly doesn't need all this space. We have 3 kids who need stability." I swear, you could hear my blood pressure rise. "And with everything Amanda's been through," Mom added, "this would really be a meaningful gesture." Amanda started pointing out where each kid would sleep, as if the decision had already been made. "James gets the room with the bay window. Freya loves the purple room. Caleb could finally have space for all his toys." I stood frozen. People stared. Some looked horrified. Some looked like they were about to break out popcorn. Then, I took a breath. "I have something to show you," I said calmly. I picked up my phone, connected it to the living room TV through the smart home system, and opened a file. "What's this?" Amanda asked, suddenly unsure. "This," I said, "is a copy of the restraining order I filed 14 years ago, after you both threw me out on my 18th birthday." Gasps. "Threw you out?" Mom snapped. "You left on your own." I kept my voice level. "You gave me a choice. Give up my college fund or leave." I left. "You didn't stop me." Amanda rolled her eyes. "That was a disagreement, not an eviction. I slept in my car for 2 weeks, in February, in Boston." Now even Jason looked stunned. Dad stepped forward from across the room, looking pale. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said. "You never told me." "Would it have mattered?" I asked. He had no answer. I swiped to the next slide. "This," I said, "is a credit report showing 3 cards and a personal loan opened in my name after I left." Jason, with his finance background, squinted at the screen. "Wait, these are real?" They used my social, my birth certificate, my info, racked up over $45,000 in debt. Mom's face drained of color. Amanda started sipping her wine like it was water. "And here," I continued, "is the paper trail that proves where the loan money went, right into a joint account shared by Amanda and Jason." Jason turned slowly. "You told me that was a gift from your mother." "It was," Amanda said weakly. "She arranged it." "By stealing my identity?" I said. Professor Hughes spoke for the first time. "That's a felony, by the way." Mom opened her mouth, but I cut her off by pulling up one last document. "The only reason no one got arrested," I said, "is because I was scared. So I made a deal. I'd pay the debt off myself if they documented everything and didn't prosecute. Aldenstein." I showed them the final file. Proof of payment. Every dollar. Paid back by me while working 3 jobs and going to school. You could have heard a pin drop. Amanda finally said, "If you filed a restraining order, why weren't we arrested?" "Because I was 18, scared, and still stupid enough to care about you." Jason looked like he might vomit. "You told me she agreed to give up her fund." I shrugged. "Lies are easy when people assume you're the responsible one." "I didn't know," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I meant what I said earlier," I told him. "If you want to talk more about it, we can." But to Amanda and my mother, I turned and said, "I will never, ever give you this house. I will not sacrifice myself again. And I sure as hell won't let you manipulate me in front of 30 witnesses. Amanda looked at me, tears forming. So that's it? You're just gonna kick your own family out on the street? Where was that energy when I was sleeping in a car? I snapped back. Mom grabbed her purse. Veronica. Yes, new name. Same Amanda. Children, let's go. But Jason didn't move. I think I'm going to stay, he said. I need to figure some things out. And with that, they left. Guests slowly started breathing again. Conversations resumed. A few people politely exited, clearly unsure if they'd just witnessed a party or a live drama special. Isabella leaned in and whispered, "That was insane." I nodded, holding back a wave of relief. But it's done. I finally said everything I needed to. After the most chaotic housewarming party anyone in my friend group had ever witnessed, you'd think I'd be curled up in a corner somewhere, questioning my life choices. But weirdly, I felt light, relieved, like I'd just dropped a 100-pound backpack I didn't even realize I'd been carrying for over a decade. People stuck around. The food was still good. The music still played. Professor Hughes toasted to integrity and boundaries. And Isabella, God bless her, clinked her glass and said, to the first housewarming that included a restraining order and a fraud expose. Laughter. Real, healing laughter. Jason stayed long after Amanda and my mom had stormed out. He stood near the bookshelf, quietly chatting with my financial advisor and occasionally glancing at his phone, likely reading a barrage of texts from Amanda. Eventually, once most of the guests had trickled out, he approached me. "I owe you an apology," he said. I nodded, not as a dismissal, but an acknowledgement. "Okay. I didn't know about the identity theft, the debt, the credit cards in your name, none of it. Amanda told me you offered the fund. Said you were going to community college anyway and didn't need the money. I didn't question it." "That sounds like her," I said. "Would it have mattered if you knew the truth back then?" Jason paused, then sighed. "I'd like to say yes. But I was a different man then. All I saw were numbers and outcomes. Amanda said it was a win-win. I believed her. And now?" He looked around at the house, my house. "Now I see what a lie costs, not just financially, but morally." I appreciated the honesty, more than he probably knew. Then he hit me with something unexpected. "What happens now?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Amanda and I, we're done. There's no salvaging this. Not after what came out today. And to be honest, I think I knew it deep down for a while. The financial lies, they go way deeper than I thought." My stomach dropped. "How bad?" He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a manila folder. "Take a look." Inside were statements, transactions, and credit reports from accounts he never opened. Second mortgages, maxed out cards, personal loans, fake signatures. It was déjà vu, only now he was the one drowning in someone else's secrets. "She did to you what they did to me," I said quietly. "Yep," he replied, "only at a much larger scale." The next few days were strangely quiet. No angry texts from Amanda. No screaming voicemails from my mom. Just silence. Until Jason called me 3 days after the party. "Hey," he said, "can we grab coffee?" We met at a neutral little cafe halfway between his office and my house. He looked tired, worn, but also like someone who was finally stepping out from under a heavy shadow. "She moved in with your mom," he said flatly. "Amanda?" "Yeah, took the kids. We agreed on 50/50 custody while we sort things out." "How are the kids handling it?" "Better than we expected, honestly. Freya's asking questions. James is quieter. Caleb just wants his Xbox back." That made me smile. Typical. Jason then pushed the folder toward me again. I had my accountant dig deeper. "It's worse than I thought. She's been funneling money for years. Business investments that never existed. Loans I never saw. We're hundreds of thousands in debt." My jaw clenched. "You filing for bankruptcy?" He nodded. "There's no other way." I paused, then said something I didn't even realize I was planning to say. "My offer still stands. For the kids, I can set up education funds for them. Locked down, college only, no access for anyone else." Jason's eyes watered not dramatically, but in that stunned, subtle way men cry when they're too exhausted to hold anything in. "That would mean everything," he said. I nodded. "They deserve better than what we had." That was the start of something new. An unexpected partnership. A new chapter, not between me and Amanda, but me and the kids. And Jason, too, in a weird twist of fate. James, the oldest, was already showing an interest in programming. I started meeting with him once a week, sometimes at the library, sometimes at Jason's new apartment, a modest but clean space where each kid had their own room and their own small bed. Freya, the middle child, turned out to be obsessed with chemistry. She brought me science kits to help with. We made slime, and a volcano that nearly exploded in the kitchen. Caleb? He was all about dinosaurs. I bought him a dinosaur encyclopedia, and he proudly read me dinosaur names with more accuracy than some paleontologists. It was chaotic, beautiful, and healing in ways I didn't expect. Meanwhile, Dad reached out again. We'd been texting back and forth since the party, but then he said something I wasn't ready for. "Can we do dinner?" I hesitated. Our relationship had been strained, to say the least, but he had stood up for me at the party, for the first time, really. He had I agreed. We met at a quiet Italian place, the kind where the waiters know your name and the bread is actually warm. Over pasta, Dad confessed things I hadn't expected to hear. "I failed you," he said. "After the divorce, I let your mom control everything. She made it hard to stay in touch, but I should have fought harder. I should have been there." I stared at him, fork halfway to my mouth. "I always wondered why you disappeared," I said. "Why you never reached out." I was ashamed. "I left your mom for someone else. Your mom knew. She used that guilt to shut me out, and I let her." "And the college fund?" "It was in a joint account," he said. "I thought she'd use it for what we agreed on your tuition. When I found out what she did, I didn't know how to face you." That stung, because it was honest. And honesty is rare in my family. The next curveball came from Amanda herself. 2 days later, I received a long email. It started with, "I know I don't deserve your time, but I need to say this." And it went on to detail her version of events, how desperate they were for a bigger house, how Mom convinced her to use the college fund, how she thought I'd be fine. She admitted to the identity theft. Not in dramatic terms, more like, "I made some bad choices when I was overwhelmed." She apologized for the party, but again, framed it as, "Emotions got the best of me." It was half apology, half justification. I showed it to Isabella. "Classic Amanda," she said, apologizing while still making herself the victim. I sighed, but at least she's acknowledging it. That's more than before. Mom, on the other hand, took a different route. Voicemails, texts, emails, the whole spectrum. Some were emotional. "Families make mistakes. We should forgive each other." Some were angry. "You embarrassed us in front of your friends." Others were guilt-laced. "I sacrificed so much for you girls, and this is how I'm repaid?" I didn't respond to any of them. Not right away. Instead, I took all this Amanda's email, Mom's manipulative text to my therapist. Yes, I had started therapy shortly after selling the company. Best decision I've ever made. Dr. Blake, my therapist, listened carefully, then said something I'll never forget. "They're used to you eventually giving in. Setting boundaries feels like rejection to them." I nodded. "I feel guilty, especially about the kids being stuck in the middle." "That's natural," she said. "But remember, you're modeling healthy family behavior now. That's more valuable than any guilt trip." Amanda started therapy too. Jason mentioned it during one of our post-drop-off check-ins. He was skeptical about whether she'd stick with it, but even that was progress. Meanwhile, Mom and Amanda living together? Disaster. According to Jason, it lasted barely 5 months before Amanda moved into her own apartment. Too much tension, too little space, way too many control issues. Amanda got a job as an administrative assistant at a small local company. Her first real job since college. I was cautiously hopeful. 6 months after the party, I hosted a small dinner to celebrate the anniversary of moving into the house. Not a big bash, just a few close friends, Isabella with her fiancé, Professor Hughes and her husband, my dad, Jason, and the kids. Even Amanda came by for an hour. She brought a candle and a handmade card from Freya. No drama, no speeches, just presence. Mom wasn't invited. She had demanded I let her bring a few toxic relatives I barely knew and hadn't seen in 15 years. When I said no, she bailed. Her loss. Later that evening, James tugged on my sleeve. "Aunt Lena, can you look at my code? I'm building a game, but the graphics won't load." We sat on the porch swing, laptop on our knees, tweaking lines of JavaScript under the glow of string lights. It was peaceful, simple, beautiful. I almost cried. He noticed. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I smiled. "Just really happy right now." And I meant it. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Home. I know it sounds cliché, but sometimes the most powerful healing comes not from grand gestures or dramatic apologies, but from small, quiet moments that feel safe. That night, sitting with James on the porch swing, debugging his code with cicadas humming in the background and fairy lights swaying in the breeze, I realized something. This house wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof. Proof that I had survived. That I had built something real from nothing. that I had broken a cycle, that I had chosen a different path, and that I wasn't going back. In the weeks that followed that one-year anniversary dinner, things started to settle into something that resembled stability. Not perfection, not fantasy, but real-life stability. The kids were adjusting well. I saw them every other weekend when they were with Jason. We'd do small things, cook breakfast, go to the library, watch documentaries, work on coding projects, and every once in a while, I'd sneak in a mini life lesson about financial literacy without them realizing it. Freya loved collecting receipts from our grocery trips so she could do budget audits. Caleb, he made a Dino Coin reward system at my house where doing chores earned them time with my iPad. And James, he started shadowing me while I worked from home, asking questions about app architecture and user flows like a little CEO in training. Jason and I had naturally formed this sort of co-parenting friendship. Not in a weird way, not romantic, just mutual respect and shared goals. We both knew what the kids had been through, and we both wanted better for them. One night, over takeout on my back patio, he admitted, "I used to think success looked like luxury cars and penthouses. Now I think it looks like peace and a good night's sleep." I laughed, but I knew exactly what he meant. Amanda, to her credit, was still attending therapy. Slowly, awkwardly, but consistently. We weren't close. We weren't even having regular conversations. But every now and then, she'd send updates through Jason. She got a promotion. She signed up for a budgeting workshop. She was learning how to pay her own bills. And one day, she texted me directly. "Hey, I saw James's coding project. It's really impressive. Thanks for being there for them." No manipulation, no guilt trip, just a plain, genuine thank you. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "He's a great kid. You did something right. Now, let's talk about Mom." If Amanda was a volcano trying to cool down, my mom was an iceberg trying to pretend it never sank the Titanic. Her behavior didn't change overnight if it changed at all. Sure, she toned down the manipulative voicemails and stopped dropping passive-aggressive comments on my social posts. But every once in a while, she'd try to wedge herself back in, on her terms. She'd call and leave messages like, "Don't you think it's time we moved past everything? Families forgive." Or, "I did what I had to do for our family. If you hadn't been pushed, you wouldn't have become so successful." Yeah, that one hit like a slap. Like my homelessness was some kind of motivational TED Talk experience. At one point, I brought it up in therapy. "I feel like she's trying to rewrite history," I said to Dr. Blake. And Dr. Blake just smiled gently. "Of course she is. People like your mother survive by spinning stories that make them the hero even when they're not. So what do? You don't have to correct the record for her. You only need to stay anchored in your truth. There what a final down the weighted fire." That became my compass. I didn't try to force reconciliation. I didn't try to burn the bridge either. I just held my ground. I agreed to occasional coffee meetups, but with clear rules, public places, one-on-one, and no guests from the extended family circus. And every time she tried to pull the conversation toward guilt or blame, I redirected or ended the interaction. Boundaries weren't punishment, they were self-respect. One of the hardest truths I had to accept during this entire journey was this: some people are not capable of accountability, not because they're evil, but because accountability feels like annihilation to them. My mom would likely never give me a full, unfiltered apology. She would never say the words, "I stole from you. I lied. I abandoned you when you needed me most." And I had to learn to live with that, to stop waiting for a moment that was never going to come, to create closure myself. Meanwhile, the kids were thriving. James started a mini coding club at school and asked if I'd come in to speak as a guest mentor. I did, and it was surreal. Standing in front of a room full of sixth graders, talking about how I went from building websites in my dorm to selling a fintech company for millions, watching their eyes light up as I showed them a real-world user flow diagram. And afterward, James stood next to me like a little business partner and said, "She's my aunt. She's really smart." I had to excuse myself to the hallway for a second because, yeah, I teared up. Freya started writing stories. She'd read them aloud on FaceTime and send me voice memos with plot twists. One day, she asked if she could write a book about a girl who gets really good at science and builds a robot that makes cookies. I told her I'd fund the entire publishing operation. Caleb, still king of dinosaurs, started a little YouTube channel where he reviews dinosaur toys and books. He called it C-Rex Reports. It has 37 subscribers and counting. They weren't just healing, they were blooming. Around this time, I decided to formalize the education funds I'd promised. I met with my financial advisor and created 3 separate trust accounts, one for each child. Locked down, college only, No early withdrawals, no third-party access. Period. I even gave them little passports I designed, each labeled Future Fund, and told them every time they learned something new, a stamp would go in their passport. Caleb asked if a dinosaur fact counted. I said, absolutely. Jason and I celebrated the move-in to his new 3-bedroom rental with pizza and root beer floats. The kids had picked out posters for their rooms. Amanda had agreed to let them decorate however they wanted, a small victory. But still. And for the first time, Jason seemed, okay, maybe not healed, but stable. Do you ever feel like the storm passed and you didn't even realize it? He asked me one evening. I thought about it. Yeah, I said. But I also think sometimes the storm is inside us, and when it goes quiet, we don't know how to trust it. Amanda kept up her therapy. She got a raise, a new car used, but dependable. Started meal planning, made a budget spreadsheet. Sometimes she texted me screenshots. Look, no overdrafts this month. Just paid off one of my cards. Freya said she wants to be like you. I didn't know what to say. As their flug. It was weird. It was messy. It was kind of beautiful. She never asked for money, never brought up the house, never mentioned the college fund. And maybe that silence was the loudest apology she was capable of. One day, we sat at a park bench while the kids played. It was the first time we'd spent more than 10 minutes together without someone buffering. She looked over and said, "You know, I didn't realize how much Mom messed both of us up." I raised an eyebrow. "You always seemed like the golden child." She nodded slowly. "I was. But it didn't mean I was safe. It meant I didn't know how to function without her approval." That landed hard, because I realized then, while I had to survive being the scapegoat, she had to survive being the golden child. And both left scars. I still don't know what kind of relationship Amanda and I will have in 5 years, or if my mom and I will ever move past polite coffee shop small talk. But I do know this. I'm not carrying their guilt anymore. I'm not apologizing for protecting my peace, and I will never let my boundaries be mistaken for cruelty again. 1 year turned into 2. The trust funds grew. The kids grew taller. My company grew too. I quietly started mentoring young women in tech, especially those from low-income backgrounds. I told my story once at a panel, and afterward, a girl came up and said, "You made me believe I can start something too." And I realized, every scar, every betrayal, every sleepless night in my car was now fuel. One night, just before bed, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and looked up at the stars. My phone buzzed. It was a message from James. "Just finished my first app. Want to test it?" I smiled. This was the real legacy. Not just a house, not just a company, but breaking the chain, choosing differently, being the adult I needed at 18 now for someone else. And that's real success. If you'd told one 8-year-old me, curled up in the back seat of a freezing car outside a Walmart, that one day I'd be sitting on a sunny porch, drinking tea in a $960,000 home, I bought myself, texting back and forth with my nephew about a mobile app he coded, I would have laughed. Or cried. Probably both. Because that version of me didn't believe life could look like this. That version of me believed family was something you survived, not something that ever healed. But here I am. And healing didn't come all at once. It came slowly, messily, in layered pieces, like tectonic plates shifting beneath the surface, until one day you wake up and realize the earthquake has passed. It wasn't just about the money, or the success, or even the revenge, as tempting as that sounds in hindsight. It was about reclaiming something I didn't even realize had been stolen from me for so long. My voice. And that voice, it was now being used in ways that actually changed lives. A few months after the 1-year anniversary of moving in, I was invited to speak at a tech accelerator program for underrepresented youth. A program funded in part by the same venture capitalists who once told me students don't care about budgeting. Funny how the world turns, huh? The room was full of high schoolers, some shy, some cocky, most trying to act like they weren't completely overwhelmed by the experience. I stood in front of them in jeans and a hoodie, holding a clicker, and started with this. "Hi, I'm Lena. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to show you that no one gets to decide your worth, especially not your family, your bank account, or that little voice in your head that says you're not ready." And they listened. Because it wasn't just some polished story of success. I told them the truth. That I'd been betrayed. That I'd been broke. That I'd been alone. That I had slept in my car, cried in bathrooms between shifts, and doubted everything more times than I could count. But I had also gotten up. Again. And again. And again. After the talk, a girl named Yasmin came up to me, 14 years old, with a sketchbook full of app mock-ups. She looked at me and said, "So you're saying I don't have to wait for someone to believe in me? I can just start?" "Yes," I told her. "Start. Learn. Build. Ask questions. Fail. Then do it again. Louder." I stayed in touch with Yasmin. She sent me her first prototype 3 weeks later. It was buggy and ugly and brilliant. And I cried when I opened it, because that was the real investment. There was no have taken notless. Meanwhile, back home, things kept shifting. Jason was steadily rebuilding his life. He finalized his bankruptcy, cut his expenses, and landed a new job, not in high finance, but at a small consultancy that valued integrity over optics. He said it was the first time he ever slept through the night without dreaming of spreadsheets. The kids were thriving. James joined a robotics team. Freya's science project won regionals. Caleb made a virtual museum of dinosaur facts and narrated it with voiceovers that sounded like a tiny David Attenborough. And Amanda? She was trying. I won't say she became a different person overnight. She didn't. But she stayed in therapy. She kept her job. She paid her bills. She started writing in a journal. And she stopped asking for things. That, honestly, was the biggest shift of all. One afternoon, she invited me to lunch. Just us. No kids, no mom. Neutral ground. We met at a local cafe, and she handed me a small envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter. "I know I can never undo what happened. I'm not asking for a clean slate, but I wanted you to know I've been learning what accountability actually means. Not just saying sorry, but understanding what I cost you." I read it slowly, twice. She fidgeted across from me, clearly fighting the urge to fill the silence with nervous talk. Finally, I looked up. "Thank you," I said. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a decade. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just finished lunch, talked about Freya's science fair, and parted ways with a quiet, genuine understanding that sometimes progress is the best apology. And then there was my mom, who remained complicated. She never really owned up to what she did, not in a way that mattered. Her apologies came with strings. Her concern was laced with manipulation. Every kind gesture was a setup for the next request. "Don't you think it's time we spent Christmas together again? Your aunt is visiting. She really wants to see you. You've done so well. It would mean a lot if you helped the rest of us now. Not just the date in francs." It was like a script she kept trying to sell me, hoping I'd forget the ending. I didn't. I couldn't. So I kept boundaries in place. Coffee once a quarter, in public. No sleepovers. No mixing her into the kids' schedules. No shared holidays. No open doors. That might sound harsh to some people, but to me, that was grace. Grace isn't letting people hurt you over and over. Grace is letting them exist without letting them control you. Therapy helped me understand something I didn't fully grasp back then. There's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is internal. It's for you. It says, "I won't let this poison me anymore." Reconciliation is external. It requires both parties to show up, to admit, to change, to do something. And my mom, she just wasn't built for reconciliation. So I forgave her and kept my distance. 2 years passed. I kept growing, not just my net worth, but my life. I started investing in other women-led startups. I launched a scholarship program for first-gen college students in tech. I built a mentorship network for underrepresented youth in CS fields. But I didn't forget my roots. I taught financial literacy workshops at local high schools. I donated laptops to families. I gave talks, not as some perfect guru, but as someone who got out. Someone who chose to rewrite the story. Around that time, I got an unexpected letter in the mail. No return address, handwritten. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a short note. "This isn't enough. It never will be. But it's what I can do right now. Thank you for never letting me completely lose you." Mom, I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cash the check. I framed the note. It was the closest she'd ever come to real remorse. And maybe the closest she could come. 1 year, for the kids' birthdays, I decided to do something different. Instead of giving them presents, I took them on a weekend trip. Just me and the 3 of them. No distractions, no screens, just nature, board games, and bad campfire food. One night, sitting around a fire pit, James asked me, "Aunt Lena, are we your real family?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Yes," I said. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Mom said you're still mad at Grandma and her, and that families fight, but that you left for a long time. So I wasn't sure if..." We counted. I reached over and took his hand. "You count, all of you, and I didn't leave you. I left a situation that hurt me. That's different." He nodded slowly, thoughtfully. Freya chimed in, "We're your chosen family, right?" I smiled. Exactly. We spent the next hour roasting marshmallows and debating whether dinosaurs would have enjoyed s'mores. I said no. Caleb argued yes, because T-Rex definitely had a sweet tooth. I let him win. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep in their bunks, I stepped outside and looked up at the stars. I thought about everything. The pain, the betrayal, the triumph, the healing. And I whispered to no one in particular. I'm okay now. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had chosen peace. I had chosen growth. I had chosen myself. After that weekend trip with the kids, the s'mores, the dinosaur debates, that heart-stopping moment when James asked if they were my real family, I came home different. Not in a big, dramatic lightning strikes kind of way. More like something subtle clicked into place. Like I'd crossed some invisible bridge, and now I was on the other side. The side where I no longer needed revenge. No longer needed anyone's apology. No longer craved validation from people who'd never truly seen me. I had something better now. Peace, direction, legacy. And that last one? That's where things started shifting again. See, when you spend most of your life just trying to survive, legacy isn't even in your vocabulary. Survival mode is about making it through today. Paying the rent, passing the test, holding yourself together long enough to make it through one more shift. But when the survival fog lifts, suddenly you start asking bigger questions. Who am I building this for? What will outlast me? What will I leave behind, not just in dollars, but in impact? And for me, that's when the word legacy started showing up, loudly. I began reevaluating everything, the way I worked, the way I spent money, the way I gave. Because let me tell you something, once you've been stolen from, once you've been made to feel like your dreams are negotiable, nothing feels more powerful than choosing exactly where your time, energy, and money go. So I started investing with more intention, not just in startups, but in stories. Young founders who reminded me of myself. Moms trying to start side hustles from their kitchen tables. Teens pitching business plans from library computers. And I didn't just throw money at them. I showed up, mentored them, tore apart pitch decks with them, listened when they cried, celebrated when they won, because that's what I needed at 18. And if I could be that for someone else, yeah, that's legacy. Meanwhile, I kept building with the kids. We had rituals now. Friday night, no judgment dinners, where even burnt grilled cheese is celebrated. Monthly budget bingo, where we gamified saving goals. Saturday coding labs with James and his friends, who now think I'm the coolest adult alive because I once debugged an animation glitch in under 3 minutes. Caleb had started calling me Auntie Lena the Legend. I wasn't correcting him. Then one afternoon, out of the blue, Jason called and said, "The kids want to do something for you." I thought it was maybe a drawing or a handmade card, but they had something else in mind. They threw me a party. Not a big one, not flashy. Just me, the kids, Jason, Isabella and her fiancé, Professor Hughes, and a few of my mentees. It was at a local park. There were balloons, a sheet cake that said, "Thank you for choosing us," in wobbly frosting letters. Freya handed me a handmade medal that said, "Best breaker of generational trauma." I laughed so hard I cried. Then James stood up, cleared his throat, and read a speech he'd written. Aunt Lena taught us what family really means. She didn't just help us with school or money. She helped us believe in ourselves. And now we want to help other people too, the way she helped us. I was a mess. Mascara everywhere. That night, after the party, I sat on my porch again, tea in hand, laptop open, and opened a blank document. Title, The Chosen Fund. It was an idea I'd been sitting with for months, but that night, it became real. A nonprofit, focused on education, mentorship, and micro grants for young adults aged 16-24 from unstable family situations. The premise was simple. If your family can't or won't support you, we will. And we do it differently. No endless paperwork. No guilt-based, prove-you're-worthy interviews. No trauma porn storytelling just to earn a few $100. We'd believe you. We'd trust your dreams. And we'd equip you. The first round of funding came from my own savings. Later, I partnered with other founders and allies in the tech world who resonated with the mission. We launched quietly just one pilot cohort of 10 students. They blew us away. One built an AI-powered resume tool. Another launched a handmade jewelry business that sold out twice in its first month. One girl, barely 19, coded a budgeting app better than the first version of Sen I ever made. I called Isabella that night and said, "We're going to need a bigger team." Running the Chosen Fund became the most fulfilling thing I'd ever done. It was like all the chapters of my life, every hardship, every betrayal, every all-nighter, every code bug, every therapist session had led to this. And every time someone asked me, how did you know what to build? I'd just say, because I built it for the girl I used to be. Meanwhile, Amanda was still Amanda. But like I said before, she was trying. She'd begun attending some parenting workshops, started learning about emotional literacy, even asked Jason if they could swap notes about schedules instead of fighting over them. Progress, not perfection. We didn't hang out regularly, but when we did see each other at family stuff, there was a softness now. Not warmth exactly, but peace. She'd stopped asking me for things. She'd also stopped pretending we were fine. That meant more than any apology. Mom, on the other hand, still complicated. We maintained our quarterly coffee meetups. She was still prickly, still tried to guilt trip me into including her more in my life. But something had shifted. Me. I no longer tried to change her. I no longer hoped for something deeper that wasn't going to happen. I stopped spinning my wheels on a relationship that refused to evolve. Instead, I treated her like an old acquaintance with history, someone I used to love deeply but now only see in polite passing. And for the first time, that was enough. On the 3rd anniversary of moving into my house, I hosted a small dinner again. No drama, no surprise speeches, just music, candles, and connection. Professor Hughes toasted to cycles broken. Isabella gave a little wink and said, 3 years and not one person tried to steal your house this time. Growth! Jason laughed. The kids rolled their eyes. I smiled. Later that night, James came up beside me as I was clearing dishes. Aunt Lena, he asked, do you ever think about what your life would have been like if they hadn't taken your college fund? I paused. Because yeah, I'd thought about that a lot over the years. And then I answered honestly, all the time. But you know what? I think I still would have made it. Maybe differently, maybe easier. But the strength I found because of what happened, the people I met, the path I took, I looked around the room at everyone I loved. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And that's the thing, isn't it? Some people go through hell and come out bitter. Others go through hell and come out builders. Me? I came out a builder. Of code. Of safe homes. Of trust funds. Of nonprofits. Of new definitions for what family can be. So if you're listening to this, and you're standing at the edge of a family fracture, if you've been made to feel disposable or small or selfish for wanting a life of your own, if you're grieving a version of family that will never exist for you, let me say this. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not the villain for protecting yourself. And you are allowed to choose peace over proximity. Sometimes healing looks like forgiveness. And sometimes it looks like a well-locked front door, a custom Wi-Fi network, and a house you bought with your own damn name on the deed. So, what do you do when you finally get everything you once dreamed of? When the noise quiets down, the debts are paid, the family drama has been replaced by boundaries, and the house you used to only picture in your Pinterest boards now has your name on the mortgage? What do you do when survival isn't the goal anymore? You redefine yourself. Because after years of fighting tooth and nail just to be okay, it's weird when okay shows up and sits beside you like an old friend. And now you've got to learn how to live with it. That was the phase I found myself in after year 3 in my house. The business was stable. The nonprofit was thriving. The kids were happy. The ex-brother-in-law turned co-parenting ally had moved into a better apartment. Amanda was still Amanda, but like I said, she stayed in her lane now. And me? I had quiet. Real quiet. The kind where you're no longer spinning. No longer fighting for a seat at the table. Now you are the one building the table. And deciding who gets a chair. So I took a break. A real one. No laptops. No pitch decks. No late-night bug fixes. No advisory calls. Just breath. I spent a month traveling alone. First time I'd ever done that. I went to Kyoto and meditated in a bamboo grove. Took a cooking class in Tuscany where I almost burned a risotto. Sat on a train through Switzerland with no Wi-Fi and no plan. Wrote in a journal. Slept in. Read 5 entire books. And somewhere along the way, something weird happened. I started dreaming forward, not backward. Because here's the thing. When you've been through trauma, your brain gets addicted to playing defense. You plan for worst-case scenarios. You anticipate betrayal. You assume it's only a matter of time before someone pulls the rug out from under you. But peace gives you permission to dream forward again. To build not just what you need to survive, but what you want to become. So I asked myself something I hadn't asked in a very long time. Who do I want to be next? When I got back home, I sat at my kitchen island, the one Amanda once said would be perfect for family breakfasts. And I opened a new doc titled, Chapter 2, Not Just a Survivor. Because that's what it was time for. Not just surviving. Not just proving people wrong. Not just healing from the past. but actually creating a new identity. Something bigger, deeper, future-focused. I started by mapping out what I didn't want. I didn't want to be the woman who kept telling the same pain story forever. I didn't want to be trapped in "look at me now" energy. I didn't want to be defined by what was taken from me. I wanted to be known for what I gave. So I asked, what legacy do I want to leave if I never write another line of code? If the business fades, the app sunsets, the money is gone, what impact remains? That question led to what became my biggest project yet. Not a new tech product, not another startup, not a nonprofit, a center, an actual physical space. 1 part learning lab, 1 part creative hub, 1 part safety net. A place for teens and young adults who, like me once upon a time, had to grow up way too fast, who were told, "You're so mature," because no one ever actually protected them, who were gifted with potential but burdened with instability. I wanted to build a space just for them, a place to feel safe and powerful, supported and seen. We called it Anchor House, because that's what it was meant to be. A place where you could drop anchor when the waters got too wild, where you could come to recharge, learn, build, belong. We launched a capital campaign with the help of some of my closest investor friends and mentors. Within 6 months, we had a space leased and a renovation underway. The building was nothing fancy, an old library with good bones and terrible plumbing. But to me, it was a cathedral. I walked through those dusty halls with tears in my eyes, because I saw it, the coding lab, the quiet nooks, the mural wall where students would paint their stories, and the kitchen god, the kitchen where someone could eat without earning it first. As we were hanging the first sign out front, James, now almost 15 and taller than me, said, "You know this is going to change people's lives, right?" I looked at him and smiled. That's the point. Meanwhile, the family landscape continued to evolve. Amanda had started dating someone new, an art teacher. She seemed happy, calmer, more grounded. She texted me one day. I took Freya to a budget workshop. She actually loved it. I think we're finally breaking the cycle. I replied, "Proud of you." And I meant it. Not in a sarcastic, "Wow, you finally did something right" way, but in the way someone means it when they've seen you at your worst and still believe in your growth. Mom was still complicated. We saw each other less and less. It wasn't dramatic. It was just natural, like 2 magnets that no longer pulled toward each other. I never cut her off completely, but I stopped bending myself to fit her version of reality. She had her story. I had mine, and I no longer felt the need to reconcile them. The kids, they were thriving. James got into a pre-college coding academy. Freya published her first short story in a school magazine. Caleb was still the Dino King, now with a blog and YouTube channel to match. At one of our weekly dinners, James said, "Aunt Lena, are you ever going to write a book about your life?" I paused. "I think I already am," I said. And I pointed around the table. To me, this is the book. You know, people think healing ends in a crescendo, a final battle, a mic drop, a fade to black with everyone hugging. But healing? It's not loud, it's not cinematic, it's not always a viral moment. Sometimes it's just coming home to yourself, sitting on your own porch, breathing easier, laughing more often, making pancakes without guilt. I still remember that girl I used to be, the one who packed her things and walked out of her childhood home with nothing but a suitcase, a laptop, and some printed scholarship papers. She thought the world was done with her. She had no idea she was just getting started. Now, she owns a home, runs a center, funds futures, raises kids she didn't birth but chose with her whole heart. And most importantly, she became the person she needed most. If you're listening to this, and you're somewhere in that messy middle trying to break free from a toxic family or grieving the one you never had, let me remind you of something. You don't have to become what they expected. You don't have to shrink to fit their comfort. You don't have to prove your worth through pain. You're allowed to choose peace. You're allowed to build differently. You're allowed to heal forward. And maybe, just maybe, you'll build something one day that reminds someone else that they're not broken, they're just getting started. Here's a funny thing that no one really tells you about healing. It's not glamorous. It's not some Instagram-worthy montage of yoga retreats and pressed green juice and inspirational quotes pasted on sunsets. It's awkward. It's slow. It's sometimes boring. And it's made up of 1,000 micro-decisions to not go backwards. Like saying no to a text from your mom that sounds nice but smells like manipulation. Or deciding not to overshare in a family group chat just to feel included. Or choosing to sit with your loneliness rather than fill it with people who make you feel worse. That's healing. And it's wildly underrated. A few months into running Anchor House, I got asked to do a podcast interview. The host was known for these deep, long-form conversations with founders who had overcome adversity. You know the vibe. I hesitated at first. I wasn't sure I wanted to rehash everything again. But then I remembered something I said during one of my mentorship sessions. Your story isn't shameful. Your silence is. I had Deviner. So, I went. We sat across from each other in a minimalist studio with too much echo and those chairs that look great on camera but hurt after 20 minutes. She started with the usual, "How did you build your first company?" But around the 30-minute mark, she leaned in and asked the real question. What did you have to unlearn in order to become who you are now? And let me tell you, that question hit like a freight train. I took a breath and said, I had to unlearn that being useful is the same as being loved. There was a pause. She nodded slowly. Say more? So I did. I explained how, growing up, I was only ever praised when I made someone else's life easier. When I babysat, when I stayed quiet, when I gave up my dreams to make room for someone else's needs, how I had been conditioned to believe that the more I sacrificed, the more worthy I became. And that's what made it so hard to walk away. Not because I didn't see the dysfunction, but because a part of me thought the pain was proof that I was doing something right. I had to learn, I told her, that love doesn't require self-abandonment. That clip went viral, not in a million views, TV deal kind of way, but in the way that matters more. It got shared in group chats. Saved by women in their 30 seconds. Quoted by first-gen students trying to explain to their parents why they weren't going to med school. Used in support group sessions. Printed out and taped on someone's fridge. And suddenly, I started getting messages like, I didn't know anyone else felt this way. You put words to something I've never been able to explain. I walked away from my family last year, and I've never felt more lost, but maybe also more free. That's when it hit me. My legacy wasn't just what I built. It was what I gave people permission to feel. That realization changed how I moved in the world. I stopped being obsessed with outcomes and started focusing on presence. I stopped hoarding success like it was my only shot at stability and started sharing it like it was sunlight. I started saying yes to things that scared me and no to things that drained me. And I finally made peace with one of the hardest truths. You can love people and still walk away from them. Let's talk about the kids, because if you want a picture of real, tangible healing, just watch children thrive in the absence of chaos. James started designing video games. Freya got into environmental science and started organizing neighborhood cleanups. Caleb was voted most likely to own a dinosaur museum by his 5th grade class. One night, James asked if he could invite a few friends to Anchor House for a hackathon-style sleepover. I said yes, but only if he helped clean afterward. He said, deal. Said in Proverbs of late God of two self. As you want of that Proverbs. They stayed up coding, ordering pizza, and arguing about whether Minecraft is better than Roblox. It's Minecraft, by the way. Don't debate me. Well, Minecraft coding. At 2 a.m., I peeked in. They were laughing, collaborating, writing on the whiteboard, and I just stood there, soaking it in, because they weren't just safe. They were free. Free to be loud, to take up space, to learn without fear, to dream without asking for permission. That's what healing looks like. That's what breaking cycles looks like. That's the inheritance I'm leaving behind. I still kept my boundaries with Mom. Every once in a while, I'd get a card in the mail. Sometimes a voicemail. Usually vague and slightly sad. I miss how things used to be, but I didn't. I missed what could have been. I mourned the mother I didn't get, but I didn't miss the gaslighting, the guilt trips, the emotional manipulation, the forced roles I was shoved into. And I didn't feel bad about it anymore. That's another quiet win in healing. Not feeling guilty about what doesn't serve you anymore. Amanda and I, still civil. We see each other at kid events. Occasionally text memes back and forth. Once, she even asked me for career advice. That was weird. But, progress. One day, I got an email from a college student I didn't know. She'd been part of our nonprofit's first microgrant program. In her message, she said, I used the money to buy a used laptop. That laptop helped me apply to internships. I just landed my first job offer. You didn't just fund me, you believed in me before anyone else did. I don't have a family, but I have you now. I stared at that email for a long time. Because that's what I built. Not just a business. Not just a house. Not just a nonprofit. But a lineage of belonging. Sometimes, people ask if I ever regret walking away from my biological family. And the truth? I don't regret it. Not for a second. Because sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and even for them is to break the system. To stop playing a role that never fit. To say, no more. To build something new. So if you're listening to this now, maybe you're the first in your family to say, "This ends with me." Maybe you're exhausted from being the fixer, the helper, the one who holds everything together while no one holds you. Maybe you've been called selfish just for choosing to survive. Let me remind you, you're not broken. You're not cruel. You're not wrong for wanting peace. You are brave. You are necessary. And you are the one who changes everything. Not by being perfect, but by choosing differently. One last story before we wrap this part. On the anniversary of Anchor House's launch, we hosted a little celebration. Students, mentors, community partners, a few skeptical city officials who'd once said, "Kids like that won't make it." Everyone was mingling. And in the back of the room, I noticed James standing next to a younger student, maybe 12. He was explaining something on a laptop, all confidence and clarity. And the kid, wide-eyed, listening like James was a wizard. And I realized we'd created generational change, not with bloodlines, not with last names, but with chosen family, with courage, with deliberate love. And that's legacy. Let's talk about something that no one prepares you for after you've survived poverty, betrayal, abandonment, and all the emotional chaos that comes from family dysfunction. Something that sounds so simple but takes years to actually believe. You are allowed to feel like you have enough. Not just money, although yes, that too, but peace, love, support, safety, room to breathe. When you grow up in emotional or financial scarcity, your nervous system gets wired for survival. Your whole sense of identity becomes built around scrambling, rushing to solve, fix, adapt, react. You're always waiting for the next thing to go wrong, the next bill, the next betrayal, the next eviction, the next guilt trip. So even when things start going right, it can feel wrong, like you've forgotten something, like you're slacking, like if you stop grinding, everything will collapse. But here's what I learned. Healing isn't just about surviving the trauma. It's about teaching your body that it's safe now. I didn't learn that in a therapy session. I learned it one Sunday morning, sitting on my back porch in an oversized hoodie, watching the sunrise while Caleb, half asleep, curled up next to me with a blanket and whispered, "Your house always feels warm." He wasn't talking about the thermostat. And in that moment, I realized we are the ones who build warmth. We don't inherit it. We don't buy it. We don't beg for it. We build it, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, choice by choice. So I started letting myself feel it. The enoughness. Letting my shoulders drop. Letting myself spend an entire Saturday reading in bed with no guilt. Letting myself say no to projects I didn't have the capacity for. Letting joy take up space in my house without constantly scanning for when it might disappear. It felt awkward at first, like wearing clothes that were too big, like joy was something I had to earn, not just receive. But over time, I learned how to stop waiting for the rug to be pulled out from under me. I got used to the idea that it's okay to rest in your own success, that you don't have to apologize for building a life that feels good. Let me take you back to a conversation I had with my therapist, Dr. Blake. I had just come back from that month-long solo trip. We were debriefing, and I said, "It feels weird not to be in crisis." She smiled. "That's called regulation." "Yeah, but what do I do now?" She leaned in and said something I'll never forget. "Now you learn how to live." That hit me harder than any breakdown I'd ever had, because I didn't realize how much of my identity was tied to suffering, to hustle, to proving, to scraping together pieces of my self-worth through productivity and sacrifice. Now I had to do the harder thing. I had to enjoy my life, not perform it, not use it as a rebuttal to people who doubted me, not showcase it like a trophy, but actually enjoy it. So I made a list, not a to-do list, not a productivity list, but a things that feel like living list. Here's what was on it. Laughing with the kids over breakfast for dinner, watching thunderstorms from the porch, hosting late-night coding marathons with my mentees, waking up without an alarm, getting a massage without justifying it to anyone, sitting in silence and not feeling panic creep in, buying flowers just because the sass. And week by week, I started ticking things off. And you know what? It changed me. Somewhere along the way, I stopped defining myself by what I'd overcome. I started defining myself by what I create. A safe space, a new model of family, a second chance for kids like James, Freya, and Caleb, a life I didn't have to recover from. I started noticing small things like how I walked into rooms now with my shoulders back instead of hunched, how I introduced myself without adding disclaimers like, "Oh, I'm just," how I stopped undercharging for my expertise, stopped over-explaining my boundaries, stopped waiting for people to come around. Even my relationships evolved. I had always been the fixer, the helper, the rescuer. It made me feel useful, needed, safe. But now, I wanted mutuality. I wanted to be poured into, not just poured out. I wanted friends and partners and colleagues who didn't flinch at my success or minimize my pain. So I pruned, quietly, lovingly. I let go of people who only called when they needed something. I stepped back from relationships that couldn't exist without me doing emotional labor. I stopped overextending myself just to keep the peace. And guess what? The people who remained, they were real. Isabella, for one, was a constant. She was engaged now, planning a low-key vineyard wedding with a partner who adored her and understood her type A chaos. One night, after a particularly amazing launch party for Anchor House's second campus, yeah, we opened a second location, more on that later, she said to me, "You know what your superpower is?" I smirked. "Multitasking?" "No," she said. "You make people feel like they're already enough even before they do anything big." I didn't respond right away, because inside I was thinking, that's what I've been trying to give myself all these years. You know, we talk so much about legacy in terms of success, but I think legacy is really about emotional inheritance. What do people learn just by being around you? What do you normalize by the way you live? What do you quietly model in the spaces you occupy? I wanted to leave behind a blueprint that said, you don't have to destroy yourself to be loved. You can walk away from what broke you and still wish it healing. You can build your own table and invite people who never had a seat. You can rest, you can laugh, you can enjoy being. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. I know that not everyone gets to this point. Some people stay stuck in the pain. Some never get the apology. Some never get out of survival mode. Some never stop trying to fix what was never theirs to carry. But if you're here listening, watching, reading, let me say this. You are allowed to put it down. The guilt, the obligation, the trauma identity. You're allowed to let go of the story that says you have to earn your worth. You're allowed to feel full, to stop hustling for your humanity, to say, this is enough, and so am I. Today, when I walk through my house, it feels different. Not just like a house I escaped to, but like a home I built from the ground up emotionally and otherwise. It's filled with laughter, with life, with leftovers in the fridge, from nights where no one needed to impress anyone. It's the kind of space I wish one 8-year-old me could have seen. I think she would have walked through the door and cried, not because it was fancy, but because it was safe. And maybe she would have whispered, "We made it." The thing they don't tell you about building the life you once begged for is that eventually you outgrow the version of yourself who built it. I know, that sounds dramatic, but stay with me. You spend years clawing your way out of chaos, dreaming, building, surviving, protecting, fixing. You fight for peace, you hustle for healing, and then one day you look around and realize, I'm not in survival anymore. And that's beautiful. But also, it's disorienting. Because now, the question isn't, how do I escape what hurt me? Now it's, what does purpose look like when I'm no longer proving anything to anyone? If you read of the quest, it is that. That's where I found myself after the third expansion of Anchor House. We had multiple campuses now, dozens of students cycling through programs, a growing staff, partnerships with tech companies, even public school collaborations. From the outside, it looked like everything was thriving, and it was. But inside, something felt off. It wasn't burnout. I'd experienced burnout. It wasn't boredom. I loved what we were doing. It was something quieter, like an internal whisper saying, "You've done what you came here to do. Now what?" At first, I tried to ignore it, buried myself in new curriculum drafts, mentored extra students, started planning a potential fourth location. But the whisper didn't stop, and eventually I realized I had accomplished my original mission, not just professionally, but emotionally. I had broken the cycle. I had built the safe space I never had. I had rewritten the story. So now, it was time to ask a different question. What do I want next? That question felt almost selfish. Want? Want wasn't a language I spoke fluently. I spoke need. I spoke should. I spoke earn it first. But want? That was new. So I sat with it. In therapy, in journaling, in long walks where I talked to myself like a madwoman under my breath. And little by little, pieces of the answer started surfacing. I wanted stillness. Not idleness, but intentional stillness. I wanted space to think big again, not from urgency, but from curiosity. To explore ideas that weren't about survival or even success, but about joy. I wanted to write. Not LinkedIn posts, not grant applications, not speeches. I wanted to write for me. About everything I'd learned, everything I still didn't know, everything I'd never said out loud until now. And more than anything, I wanted to create quiet impact. Not always loud, not always front and center, but sustainable, subtle, powerful. So I made a decision that shocked even me. I stepped back, not out, just back. I brought on an executive director for Anchor House, someone I trusted deeply, someone who had been a student in the very first cohort. Yep, full circle. Her name was Aaliyah. I'll never forget our meeting when I offered her the job. She stared at me and said, "Are you sure I'm not you?" And I smiled. That's the point. I'm not supposed to be the face of everything forever. I'm supposed to be the first, not the only. She cried. So did I. With Aaliyah in place, I moved into a founder emeritus role, still involved, still supportive, but no longer in the trenches day to day. At first, I panicked. What if I lost my edge? What if people forgot me? What if letting go meant becoming irrelevant? But then, something amazing happened. I didn't disappear. I re-emerged. I started writing. Long mornings at the local cafe. Afternoons on my porch. Late nights curled up with tea and my laptop open. At first, it was messy. More therapy than structure. A dumping ground of memories, lessons, confessions, unspoken grief. But then, something started forming. A book, not a memoir. Not a how-to guide, but a field guide for cycle breakers. For the ones who leave family dinners with their hearts in pieces. For the ones who feel guilty for being the first to make it out. For the ones who've built lives they're proud of but still feel a strange, quiet ache inside. I called it, I'm also convenient out way I. Breaking is building. Actually wrecking of the tweened and round. When we stand of the store its play. The title came from a note I once scribbled in a journal during the worst week of my life. The week I slept in my car. When I still smelled like espresso from the cafe. When I didn't know if I'd make it another month. I had written, if I survive this, I swear I'll make something beautiful from the wreckage. This was me, keeping that promise. The book wasn't easy to write. I had to revisit moments I'd carefully boxed up and labeled, "Don't touch." The night I walked out, the first time I realized my mom was never going to apologize. The emails from Amanda that tried to reframe theft as a misunderstanding. But I also got to revisit the miracles, Dr. Hughes and her guest room, Isabella and her unshakable belief in me. The first time James said, "You're my real family." And in putting it all together, I realized something. I had built a life not in spite of the pain, but through it. And that distinction changed everything. When the book finally came out, I expected a few readers, maybe some emails, a small ripple. Instead, it caught fire, not because it was flashy, but because it was honest. People were hungry for something that didn't pretend healing was linear. That didn't sugarcoat the grief of choosing yourself. That didn't shame them for walking away from toxic families. Messages poured in. You helped me understand why I always feel so guilty for being okay. What of the strings of the pressed? I finally filed the paperwork to move out. Your words gave me the push. I read this sitting in a Greyhound bus after cutting off my parents. I felt less alone. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just a founder. I wasn't just a survivor. I wasn't even just a mentor. I was a mirror. And sometimes, that's all people need to see themselves reflected in someone who made it out. One night, after a book event, I sat on the edge of my bed and replayed everything in my head, all of it. The confrontation in my kitchen at 18, the frostbite mornings in the backseat of my car, the sleepless startup nights, the first big investor rejection, the moment I stood in my home and faced my past without blinking, and I whispered to myself, almost in disbelief, we really did this, not I, we. Because I didn't do it alone. I had help. I had community. I had luck and grace and late-night prayers and unexpected mentors and kids who reminded me every day why this all mattered. Legacy, I realized, isn't about how big your name gets. It's about how deep your impact goes. And mine, it was rippling outward, through Anchor House, through the book, through quiet conversations in DMs and classrooms and kitchen tables, through chosen families learning how to heal without a roadmap, through people finally understanding that boundaries are not betrayal, they are birthplaces of peace. So, if you've made it this far with me, here's what I want you to remember. Your healing is your legacy. Every time you say, this ends with me, every time you choose rest over resentment, every time you love your inner child by creating safety as an adult, every time you model softness without submission, every time you walk away and don't look back, you're doing sacred work. You're not just breaking, you're building. There's a moment after everything settles, after you've healed, built, grown, forgiven, maybe even published a book about it all, when a new, unexpected question floats in. It doesn't come loud or urgent. It comes on a quiet afternoon, in the stillness, in the space you finally created for yourself. And it whispers, Now that you're safe, do you trust yourself to love again? Not just romantic love, but closeness, intimacy, letting someone in not out of need or trauma bonding, but because you want to. Because here's the thing no one talks about. After surviving dysfunctional love, healthy love feels suspicious. Let me explain. When you grow up in a household where love is conditional, where affection comes after compliance, and connection requires sacrifice, you learn to equate love with loss. Love means giving up your needs. Love means staying small. Love means twisting yourself into a version that doesn't take up too much space. So when someone good shows up, someone who respects your boundaries, doesn't demand more than you offer, and doesn't flinch when you say no, your nervous system goes, wait, where's the trap? I wish I could say I navigated that realization gracefully. I didn't. I dated a few people post-success. Nice on paper, impressive resumes, therapy literate and brunch friendly, but I kept holding back. Not obviously, not rudely, just enough. Enough that they didn't notice, but I did. And eventually they'd say something like, I feel like you never fully let me in. And I'd smile. Apologize. Say I wasn't ready. Wish them well. Then I'd close the door and sit with the question, am I broken or just careful? Enter Malcolm. I wasn't looking. We met at a quiet community event, one of those local panel things about ethical entrepreneurship. He wasn't flashy. Didn't ask what I did. Didn't offer a pitch. He just sat beside me and passed me a napkin when I spilled water on my notepad. Later, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee, not in a networking way, but in a, I'm genuinely interested in your brain kind of way. It caught me off guard, so I said yes. That first coffee turned into 5. Over time, I learned he was a high school teacher, taught history, loved documentaries, used to be a social worker, had a laugh that made people turn their heads in the good way. He didn't Google me until the 3rd week. Didn't ask about the book until I brought it up. And when I finally told him the full story, the family stuff, the identity theft, the estrangement, all of it, he didn't flinch. He just said, I'm sorry that happened to you. You didn't deserve that. No attempt to fix it. No armchair therapy, just empathy. It was disarming and also terrifying because suddenly I couldn't hide behind my resume anymore. Malcolm didn't care that I built a tech startup, didn't care about the interviews or accolades or headlines. He cared about who I was when I wasn't being impressive, and that scared the hell out of me. We took it slow, not out of strategy, but necessity. He wasn't in a rush. I wasn't in a rush, and thank God for that. Because even now, even healed and healthy and whole, I still had to fight the instinct to prove I was worth keeping. There were nights I'd hear a text ding and brace for bad news. There were moments I'd catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop for the twist, the betrayal, the manipulation, but it never came. Instead, Malcolm just stayed, with kindness, with curiosity, with respect. And slowly, I learned how to receive love, not just offer it. One night I confessed, I don't know how to be loved without having to earn it. It had to still be a next times. The tractional place of then. He looked at me and said, then let me show you. That's when I realized something else. Healing doesn't end when you stop crying. It deepens when you let joy stay. So many of us are good at surviving, at rebuilding, at reclaiming. But thriving? That's a whole other skill set. And now, I was finally learning it. My relationship started reflecting that. I got closer with Isabella, not just the startup warrior side of her, but the softer side. We started taking walks that weren't about strategy, made brunch just because, planned a weekend trip that didn't require a single business-related justification. It felt nourishing. Amanda and I found a rhythm too, not best friends, not even close siblings, but honest. We had dinner with the kids once a month, shared updates, did the polite but warm dance that comes when two people are doing their best and don't want to reopen old wounds. And for now, that was enough. Mom, still distant, but I'd stopped hoping she'd change. And in that release, I found peace. We had occasional check-ins, holiday cards, polite calls, but I no longer gave her the power to decide whether I was a good daughter or a selfish disappointment. That power belonged to me now. Meanwhile, Anchor House flourished under Aaliyah's leadership. She introduced new mental health programming, partnered with local clinics, launched a new mentorship tier that included second-chance adults, not just youth. Watching her speak at a City Hall event made me cry. Not because I was proud of my legacy, but because I knew I'd helped build a bridge. One she was now walking across, leading others behind her. That's real impact. The kind that continues whether you're in the room or not. Malcolm and I eventually moved in together. I'll spare you the logistics and IKEA arguments, But let me tell you, building a home with someone who doesn't see you as a project to fix or a trophy to display, it's radical. We had a framed photo of our first coffee date. A houseplant named Greg that we constantly forgot to water. A shared Spotify playlist titled Soft Afternoons. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to make room for someone else. So here I am now, mid-30 seconds. Peaceful, rooted, soft in ways I once thought were weaknesses. And if I had to sum it all up, this entire journey from trauma to tenderness, it would come down to this. You get to rewrite the rules, and you get to be loved without performance. You are not the roles they cast you in, not the villain they painted you as, not the savior they demanded you become. You are allowed to choose softness after surviving fire. You are allowed to choose connection after choosing distance. And above all, you are allowed to be happy without guilt. A few years ago, if you'd asked me what home meant, I would have answered fast. It's something you build for yourself, something no one can take away. Absolution. That answer came from a place of survival, from needing to reclaim what was stolen, from planting a flag in the ground and saying, "This is mine." And I still believe that. Partly. But as time passed, and the edges of my life softened, something else started to take shape. A new understanding of home. Not as a fortress, not as a trophy, not even as a response to trauma, but as a living, breathing feeling. Let me tell you how I got there. It started with a call, from a number I didn't recognize, local area code. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me to. "Lena, it's Pastor Tom." I blinked. Pastor Tom had been the youth pastor at the church I attended as a teenager, back when Mom still tried to maintain appearances of being a good Christian family. He was kind, quiet, the sort of man who remembered your birthday even if your mom didn't. "I hope I'm not overstepping," he said. Well, your mother asked me to reach out." At first, my chest tightened. Old instincts kicked in. What does she want now? Is she sick? Is this another manipulation? But then he said something unexpected. "She's been struggling, health-wise, emotionally. She didn't know how to say it herself. But she asked me to tell you she'd like to see you." I didn't answer right away. Not out of spite, out of caution. So much had been broken. So much had not been said. And I didn't owe her anything. But I also knew something else. I wasn't the same girl who left. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure from her, because I had already closed the door myself. So if I went back, it wouldn't be to finish the story. It would be to witness how far I'd come. Malcolm and I talked about it that night. I told him I wasn't sure what I was walking into, that I didn't know if I'd be greeted with warmth or more guilt. He said something I'll never forget. "You don't need her to be different. You just need to be solid in who you are now." So I went. Her apartment was smaller than I expected. Clean. Quiet. She opened the door slowly. She'd aged. Her hair thinner. Eyes tired. But her posture, still proud. Still trying to control the moment. "Come in," she said. Not warmly, not coldly, just mechanically. I stepped inside. She offered me tea. I said yes. She asked about my work. I answered vaguely. And for a few minutes, we danced around each other, like strangers wearing the costumes of mother and daughter. But eventually, she cracked. I know I wasn't a good mother. That's how it started. Her voice didn't shake. It wasn't theatrical. It was resigned. "I didn't protect you. I didn't believe you. I didn't support you. And I didn't apologize." She looked up. I still don't know how. And in that moment, something shifted in me. Not pity, not anger, but clarity. She was never going to become the mother I needed. But I didn't need her to be, because I had already mothered myself. I didn't tell her I forgave her, because I hadn't, not fully, and that's okay. Forgiveness isn't a one-time event. It's a process, and sometimes it's a boundary, not a bridge. So instead, I said, "I've built a life that's safe now. I hope you're finding your own version of that too." She nodded. We sat in silence. Not comfortable, but not hostile either. Just real. And for the first time in my life, I walked away from her without carrying anything that wasn't mine. No guilt, no resentment, no invisible backpack of grief. Just me, present, peaceful, free. A few weeks later, she sent me a letter. No long explanations, no rewrites of history. Just one page. "Thank you for visiting. I may never understand everything you went through, but I believe you now. And I want you to know, I'm proud of what you've built, even if I wasn't there to help you build it." I sat with that letter for a long time, didn't frame it, didn't post about it, just tucked it away in a drawer labeled, "Things I never expected but still appreciate." So yeah, that's what home means now. Not the house, not the furniture, not even the life I've built from the ashes. Home is the feeling I carry when I know I've come back to myself. It's in the kids laughing in my kitchen, spilling juice on my floors. It's in Malcolm sitting beside me on the porch, telling me about a weird dream he had. It's in the letters I get from students who say, "Anchor House saved me." It's in the silence that no longer feels threatening. It's in the mirror, where I no longer flinch at my reflection. I used to think I had to leave to find home. Now, I realize home isn't where you go when you're tired of running. Home is who you become when you stop running. If you're watching this, listening to this, or reading this somewhere, maybe after leaving a painful relationship, or stepping out of a toxic family system, or simply starting over, this part is for you. You are allowed to build a home that your past self wouldn't even recognize. You are allowed to be the safe place. You are allowed to define what love feels like now. You don't owe anyone a version of you that no longer exists. Sometimes, returning home isn't about walking back into the house you left. It's about walking back into your own body, your own truth, your own peace, and whispering, "We're safe now. We don't have to earn love anymore. We are already enough." And we watch the sad of the raxt wantonas. And we watching the to speak the prak the stas. And faced in the nodder. If you had asked me years ago what leaving a legacy looked like, I probably would have said something like, a house, a business, a name people remember. And yeah, I've got those things now. The house is still here, still mine. The business, sold and scaled. The name, Google label, sure. But that's not the legacy that keeps me up at night in the good way. That's not the thing that humbles me, that brings tears to my eyes when I least expect it, that makes me sit in my car for an extra 10 minutes before walking into the house just to feel it all. Because that legacy is people. Let me explain. A few months ago, I was speaking at a school in a low-income neighborhood just outside the city. Not a huge keynote, not a glamorous TEDx thing, just a small classroom with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs and students who looked like versions of me from 15 years ago. I talked about what I usually talk about, starting over. Resilience, money, boundaries, family, code. But at the end, during Q&A, a girl raised her hand, quiet, shy, hoodie pulled over her head. She asked, "How do you stop feeling guilty for being the one who made it out?" And y'all, I had to take a breath. Because that's the question I've been answering in my own life, over and over again, without even realizing it. We don't talk enough about survivor's guilt in healing work. The guilt that comes when you step out of the fire burned, but alive, while others you loved stayed behind. The guilt of thriving when you were told you never would. The guilt of building when others only know how to take. The guilt of joy when your childhood was a masterclass in endurance. And here's what I told her. You don't owe anyone your suffering. You don't balance the scales by breaking yourself. You give back by showing what's possible. You give back by modeling freedom, by holding the door open, not dragging people through it. She nodded slowly. And I could see it click, not completely, not forever, but enough. Enough to maybe believe it later when it mattered most. That's legacy. Not that I showed up, not that I gave a good talk, but that I gave her a permission slip to let go of the guilt. Letting go is one of the bravest things you'll ever do. Letting go of who you had to be just to survive. Letting go of the stories that were never yours. Letting go of people who only loved you when you were convenient or compliant. And letting go of the guilt that comes with healing. Because you don't owe your healing to the ones who hurt you. You don't have to invite them into the new world you built just to prove you're still kind. You don't have to explain your boundaries to those committed to misunderstanding them. You don't have to soften your light just because it makes them squint. I learned this most deeply through the kids. James is now deep into his coding journey. He's applying to summer programs I once dreamed about. He calls me his co-CEO and sends me pitch decks for his app ideas. And recently, he told me, "Sometimes I feel bad that I get to grow up this way, and you didn't." I stopped him right there. "No, James, you are the reason I healed, not the guilt for what I missed. Every time you ask for help without shame, every time you take up space without apology, every time you trust me to show up for you, that's the real redemption. Legacy is the ripple effect of your healing. It's not what you build once. It's what you make possible over and over again for others. It's the student who watches you set a boundary and finally sets one with their own mom. It's the friend who hears you say, "I'm not available for that," and realizes they don't have to be either. It's the kid who sees you hold a firm line and finally understands that love doesn't mean self-erasure. That's how the cycle ends, not with a dramatic showdown, but with 1,000 quiet choices, repeated daily, until healing becomes the norm. One day, while cleaning out old boxes, I found a letter I wrote to myself at 19. It was meant to be opened when life felt safe again. Canicas and the narrative causes. It said, "If you made it this far, I hope you still love big. I hope you still believe in your own softness. I hope you're not scared to rest. And I hope you don't spend your whole life proving that you're not like them. Just be like you." I cried. Of course I did. Because sometimes, the most powerful legacy isn't for the world. It's for the version of you who thought they'd never get here. So yeah, these days, when people ask what I'm most proud of, I could say the book, the nonprofit, the startup sale, the home I built, the life I've shaped, and all of that's true. But you want to know what I really say? I'm proud that the kids don't flinch when they mess up. I'm proud that they say I'm confused without shame. I'm proud that they know I won't leave when things get hard. That's legacy. That's the cycle ending in real time. Malcolm and I recently hosted a dinner at our place. Just close friends, chosen family, students, mentors, Aaliyah, Isabella and her now husband, Jason and the kids. It was loud, messy, joyful. At one point, James stood up awkwardly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to say something, and said, "This is the kind of family I always hoped I'd have. Thanks for making it real." I didn't cry. Okay, I did cry, but I waited until after dessert. Because in that moment I realized, I don't just have a legacy, I'm living inside it. So if you're in the thick of it right now, if you're rebuilding, if you're questioning everything, if you're the first in your family to say enough, if you're scared that healing means letting go of the people who raised you, let me offer you this. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not heartless for wanting more. You are not cruel for protecting yourself. You are brave. You are the first brick in the new foundation. You are the blueprint for everyone who comes after you. You are someone else's permission slip, not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. This is the ripple. This is the legacy. And you're already a part of it. You know what no one really prepares you for? What ambition feels like after healing. Because ambition when you're still bleeding has a bite to it. It's fiery, urgent, a survival instinct wrapped in hustle. It says, "I'll show them. I'll outrun this. I'll succeed so hard that they'll have to respect me, even if they never loved me." And sometimes, that fire saves your life. But later, when you've healed, when the house is quiet, when the applause fades, when the money's good, when your heart isn't racing anymore, just quietly beating like it's supposed to, you're left standing in your own beautiful life asking, now that I don't need to prove anything, what do I actually want? Thanks for watching for Mothers. Quote, that was me, sitting on the edge of 37. Not exactly old, not exactly young, just rooted. Rooted, but curious. Peaceful, but restless in a new way. It's not that I didn't love my work, I did. It's that I'd built so much of it on instinct, necessity, urgency, and now I had time to think, to pivot, to dream again without the shadow of them looming behind me. So I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I stopped chasing. No new launches, no new deadlines, no filling my calendar just to keep the emptiness out. I created space, not because I was burnt out, but because I was ready to evolve. That space started asking new questions. What if ambition didn't have to feel like a war? There's a rest of cruisin' fan of he. What if success could be soft? What if your best work comes from overflow, not depletion? And honestly, those questions scared me. Because for so long, tension had been my fuel. Now I had to learn how to move from desire, not damage. That's when I stumbled into what would become my next season. It wasn't an idea I chased. It was something that found me. It started with a conversation over dinner with Freya, of all people. She was 14 at the time, elbows on the table, animatedly explaining her latest science project. We're testing soil samples and seeing how local farming affects nutrient levels. It's actually so cool. And it made me think like, what's going to happen if no one teaches kids this stuff? I raised an eyebrow. So, you want to teach kids soil science? She shrugged. I want to teach kids everything. Adults forget to teach us. I laughed. That's a big job. But inside, I felt a spark. The next week, I took a walk. You know, the kind no destination, just letting your brain meander. And I kept turning that idea over in my head. What if there was a school but not a school where kids learned the things that actually matter? Like, how to communicate, how to say no without guilt, how to grow food, how to budget without shame, how to regulate their emotions, how to disagree without turning it into a war, how to build instead of burn, not as a one-time workshop, but as a life system. What if we gave the next generation roots and wings? I started sketching out a framework, not a school, not a daycare, not just an after-school program, something else, A life studio. That's what I called it, where kids, and honestly, young adults too, could practice life the way artists practice brushstrokes. Safe, messy, iterative, human. It wasn't about grades. It wasn't about college readiness. It was about wholeness, readiness. I brought it to the board at Anchor House. Not to pitch a pivot, just to share. But they lit up. Aaliyah said, "We're already halfway there. This is just the next evolution." And that's when it clicked. I wasn't abandoning my mission. I was deepening it, shifting from reaction to intention, from fixing what's broken to building what's missing. We launched the pilot program under the name Root Lab. 10 kids, 1 space, 1 semester. They learned conflict resolution, took a cooking class with Malcolm, did a unit on how to say "I'm not okay" in 5 different ways. They journaled, they made vision boards. They had hard conversations about grief, anger, boundaries, race, anxiety, money, and they didn't flinch. And at the end of the term, one of them, Kendra, age 15, stood up and said, "This is the first place where I've never had to pretend I'm okay just to be welcomed." I cried, of course, because I knew that feeling. I'd spent years perfecting the performance of fine. And here was a room full of kids unlearning that at 15. That's legacy too. You see, ambition in your 20s often looks like fire. Flashy, loud, disruptive. But ambition in your 30s, 40s, beyond, it starts to look more like gardening. Deliberate, seasonal, rooted, no rush, just rhythm. And I was ready to stop setting things on fire just to watch myself rise from the ashes. I was ready to cultivate. That shift bled into everything. How I led, how I loved, how I rested. I started taking full weekends off, taught the kids how to cook their own meals instead of over-functioning, said no to panels that didn't align, donated without needing public credit. I stopped needing to be seen in order to feel valid, because I had finally seen myself. Malcolm noticed the change before I did. He said, "You laugh more now." I blinked. "I do?" "You smile when no one's watching. That's how I know it's real." Yeah, I was smiling more, even without an audience. One night, as we were closing up after a Root Lab session, I sat on the floor of the community room with James, now taller than me, practically a young adult. He looked around and said, "You built all this because of what happened to you, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, at first." He tilted his head. "And now?" I thought for a second, then smiled. "Now I build because I know how good it feels to be free, and I want other people to have that too." He nodded slowly. "Cool, I want to do that too." That moment, that was it. That was everything. So if you're sitting in your own life, maybe post-crisis, maybe mid-transition, wondering, who am I if I'm no longer surviving? Anyone to die. Let me tell you, you're someone who now gets to build without bleeding. You're someone who gets to define success by softness, not speed. You're someone who can slow down not because you've lost momentum, but because you've gained wisdom. Ambition doesn't die after healing. It just matures. It becomes less about proving and more about planting. And let me tell you something else. That version of ambition, that gentle, intentional, sustainable ambition, it lasts longer, tastes sweeter, touches more people, and best of all, it doesn't require sacrificing yourself at the altar of achievement. It's strange how often I think about her. That girl, 18 years old, a too heavy backpack, a stiff jaw, a quiet storm building in her chest, pulling a suitcase down the front steps of a house that never felt like hers. Alone, scared, but already deciding, somewhere deep in her gut, if no one else chooses me, I will. I think about her every time I drive past a Walmart parking lot, every time I write a tuition check for one of the kids, every time I walk into a room I belong in and don't shrink. And lately, I've been wondering, what would I say to her now? It's a question that came up in therapy. Dr. Blake smiled as she asked it, pen resting gently in her lap. If your 8-year-old self walked into this room right now, what would you want her to know? The fodder displaying with is a vat of the posins and a cannabis of there. The posins of the con of the posins. I didn't answer right away. It felt too big, too tender, too sacred. But after a long, long silence, I began to speak. And now, after everything after the house, the healing, the kids, the business, the book, the life I never thought I'd have, I want to share that letter with you. A letter to the girl who left everything and built everything that came after. Hi, sweetheart. I know you're tired. I know your heart is cracked open and raw. I know the people you trusted most have made you feel small, selfish, disposable. I know your hands are shaking as you zip your suitcase. I know you're trying not to cry. I know a part of you wonders if this is the biggest mistake of your life. Let me tell you something gently, because no one else ever did. You are not wrong for choosing yourself. You are not broken. You are not dramatic. You are not cruel. You are awake and brave. And exactly right. I won't lie to you. The road ahead won't be easy. There will be nights when you cry on library desks and pretend it's allergies. Mornings where the sound of your alarm feels like violence. Seasons where success tastes like exhaustion instead of joy. You will eat too many instant noodles. You will say yes to people who don't deserve you. You will want to give up more than once. But I promise you this, you won't. You will keep going. Not because you're invincible, but because you learn how to trust yourself. And that trust, it will save you. Over and over and over again. One day, you'll wake up in a home that feels like your heartbeat. You'll walk barefoot through hardwood floors you paid for yourself. You'll pour coffee into your favorite chipped mug and smile. Not because life is perfect, but because you're not scared anymore. You'll look around and realize, this is mine, all of it, and I didn't have to destroy myself to get here. You'll find family too. Not always the kind that shares your blood, but the kind that shows up, the kind that listens, the kind that holds space for you without needing to fix or shrink you. You'll have kids around your dinner table, not your kids, but yours all the same. They'll call you auntie. They'll trust you. They'll heal through you. You'll be the adult you never had. And that will matter more than any trophy ever could. You'll fall in love, not fast, not desperate, but with someone who sees you, someone who doesn't ask you to shrink, who doesn't flinch when you're soft, who doesn't punish you for your scars. You'll learn that love doesn't have to hurt, that you can rest in it, that you can say no and still be held. That safety isn't boring, it's revolutionary. And you will glow. Not for the world, not for validation, not for revenge. You'll glow because you survived. And then you thrived. And then you stayed soft anyway. They will never fully understand what they lost when they let you go. And one day, you'll stop needing them to, because your peace will be louder than their absence. And that's freedom. So to the girl who left, I want you to know, you didn't ruin anything. You refused to keep bleeding for people who called it love. You didn't break the family. You refused to be broken by it. You are not too much. You were just too real for people committed to pretending. One day, you'll build something that makes others feel safe enough to start again. You'll be someone's reason they didn't give up. You'll say, I love you, and actually mean it because you've learned how to say it to yourself first. And you'll sit on a porch, under string lights, with music playing quietly behind you, and you'll sip tea and laugh with someone who never needed you to perform, and it will hit you, out of nowhere. I made it. So take that next step. Pack your bag. Open the door. Let it close behind you. They won't chase you, but that's okay, because you're about to meet the rest of your life. And she is so damn proud of you. Love, the woman you became, because you didn't give up. I finished reading the letter aloud to Dr. Blake and sat in silence. She didn't speak. She just nodded. And in that moment, I didn't need her to say anything, because I'd said it, out loud, to myself. For every girl who ever had to walk away to find herself, that's where I'll leave this story. Not with a bow, not with a dramatic final twist, but with truth. Because healing doesn't mean nothing ever hurts again. It means you know what to do when it does. It means you come home to yourself over and over, and you realize you were never too much. You were just too far ahead of where they were willing to go. And now, you don't have to wait anymore. You go anyway.